This episode of the AI XR podcast is brought to you by our friends at Zapper. If you're in the XR space, you've probably felt the pain of juggling different tools, vendors, and platforms just to get an AR or VR project off the ground. It's exhausting, and it can really slow you down. That's where Zapper comes in. They've built a complete suite of tools and creative services all under one roof to make creating immersive experiences not just possible, but practical. Their next gen 3D web tool, Mattercraft, is a game changer for building immersive experiences for headsets, smartphones, and AR, VR, and WebXR. It combines the power and flexibility of the 3JS rendering engine with a rich visual editor, making it super intuitive and easy for designers and developers to use. Put simply, you get the creative freedom of a powerful 3D engine with none of the headaches. So if you're ready to take your immersive projects to the next level, head over to zapper.com and see what they can do for you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Shilowitz and Rony Abovitz for the AI XR podcast. Today is Friday, 18th, 2025. Good morning, guys.
Morning, gentlemen.
Guys.
We have a great guest today, Adam Draper of Boost VC. I think he's a fourth generation VC. His father invested in my first company, but he has an amazing portfolio of hundreds of companies in the most cutting edge categories, including space, biotech, and XR. So there's something for everybody in this. I'm really excited about it. And been a really busy news week too. So, geez, a lot to talk about.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to talk to him, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, but I think the statistic on startups across all sectors around the universe is 95% of startups that get to any round of funding ultimately fail. So it'll be interesting to talk to him about how he is breaking those odds and what are his odds compared to that 95% global.
Yeah.
Global.
He's invested in so many companies we've had on the show. SideQuest, Spaces, Wave, Golf Plus, Shapes.
Yeah.
Just great companies. The guy has really good
in the sector.
Yeah. So okay, let's jump ahead here to the news. So Google is guilty again. Those of monopoly practices. That should be a surprise to no one. What is a surprise to me is that neither Google nor Meta is getting any relief from the government on these antitrust cases.
Yeah, that seems to be a statistical provability that if you attempt to get involved with this administration in any way, shape, or form, you will ultimately lose. That you will not win. It's a provable fact, right, Rony?
I say highly provable, but I think there was a huge misunderstanding between I think we've called them the free market libertarians, who thought deal flow, acquisitions, IPOs, like let's build this country, free trade. It's none of that. It's something that they thought that the guy in the White House was telling people things he didn't really believe. They were not actually listening to what he said he was going to do. And now that he's doing what he said he was going to do, they're like, oh my God, like we didn't really think
you'd actually
going to like make everyone wear underwear on their head on Friday.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've had behind the scenes conversation with folks like +1 away from him. And they're like, no, he's just saying those things. I'm like, no, he's not just saying those things. And now that things are playing out, I've called those people back and I'm like, so did he just say those things or are those things real? And they don't really have anything to say. So
well, I mean, have the neocons ever apologized for Iraq and Afghanistan? The Democrats stood by and took the blame for what the neocons did in the 2000s, and they said, just wait and see. It's too soon to tell. You have to wait 10 years to see. Well, we waited 20 fucking years, and look at what the hell they did. And we haven't heard a peep. David Brooks, the head neocon, is going on and on and on about Donald Trump. Well, you know what, you neocons? You started this. Dick Cheney, you started this. This was the inevitable final destination to your slash and burn tactics. So you burned the place down. This is who inherits the ashes.
So Charlie and Ted, here's a question. And it's probably not in the scope of our podcast, but is there a way back home? Meaning, my guess, and I talk to lots of normal people too. Most normal Americans don't want any of this insanity. They don't want what we're telling our friends. They don't want to be friends with our worst enemies. They don't want any of this. Like, and people feel like somehow helpless that a very tiny handful of people who probably duped some of them into voting for them are doing things they don't agree with. So
Well,
we're a
you live in
democracy. How
Florida.
is this happening?
You tell excuse me. You tell me. Florida used to be a bastion of liberal Jews from the Northeast, and it's become, cracker heaven.
Here's a good metaphor for you guys that I've heard a few different ways. If you give your bully your lunch money once,
Yeah.
he'll continue to take your lunch money over and over again until you find a way to stop him taking your lunch money. And at this point, most of the world is trying to figure out a way to stop giving this effect. It's not really a person, it's an effect, right? The lunch money that they've all got. And it's escalating. And, there are protests all around the United States every day and all around the world. And we're seeing that bully effect start to backfire now.
Well,
So
I hope
it
that's
takes
true.
a lot.
Yeah, let's get on to the news. We got 6 minutes. Adam
Yeah.
is not somebody I'm going to leave foundering
Yeah,
in
don't
the
leave him hanging.
green room.
Right.
No,
So
no, no.
let me just hit a couple ones. This one we should bear some conversation because OpenAI is talking about developing a social network, which is a really fun idea. Even though I have no idea what it would really be, I guess they're talking about something like what Midjourney does, where people share images or something. I don't know, but it's I mean,
So can I tell you what I think's happening? Because
please.
I have had a couple interactions with Sam over the years, not a lot, but at tech conferences and things, sitting at a lunch table. And I know a lot of people that are around him. I think when you're suddenly worth 300 billion on paper and you've got SoftBank and others throwing another 40 billion at you, you have this feeling of infinite. Everything is possible. I could do anything to anybody. And if you have an expansive mind, which I think Sam does, who wants to do lots of things and eat everything on the table, and then you give that person 40 billion at a 300 billion market cap, and he thinks he's going to be a $3 trillion company in 5-6 years. He might. If he hits 120 billion in revenue, he'll be a $3 trillion company. That's what happens. Like, he could do anything. There's this I can do anythingness to it, which is like the weird version of the American dream. Like, no limit, I could do anything. And I think this is not a result of a very well thought out idea. It's I have nearly infinite money, a crazy market cap. Everyone does what I want. I think if I take any of us and put us in that position, it'd be hard. You would have to have amazing self restraint
Yeah.
not to go down those roads.
Rony, do you have other examples of people that have had that sort of working capital effect and that I can do anything, I can be anything, and has it worked out or hasn't not worked out?
I don't think it works out that well.
Yeah.
I think what happens is like let's use Jensen from NVIDIA, who built the hard way, slowly, from the Denny's, a company worth like trillions, but
Mm-hmm.
like scrimping and scraping, and it didn't happen like very fast, right? And it didn't come showering out and like very hard earned. I think Jensen's a little more grounded. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of measured thoughtfulness, and I think he talks about a lot what they don't do, like a huge amount of what they don't do. I think people like that have like massive, massive valuations. I mean, they're doing a lot more than they used to, but there's that sense of control which comes from like a place of almost poverty, and almost like depression era, like scraping your way forward versus like too fast, too much. I don't know. Sam might, maybe he'll find
Sam
a way
has
out, but
he says inadvertently revealed at TED that he has upwards of 800 million um, daily average users, which is
huge.
I mean that's like 10% of the people. That's starting to be like Facebook kind of numbers.
Yeah,
And
that's
I think when you get those numbers, you're like, how do I leverage this? This is
Yeah,
like
and
the
by the way,
biggest aggregation of eyeballs in history. How do I leverage this?
but Charlie, think about this. Meta also has, uh, uh, AI systems. So they're coming after OpenAI. So OpenAI is like, we're going to come after you. I
Right.
mean, this is like Godfather stuff.
It is.
Families fighting. This is like. And by the way, both guys are incredibly ruthless. Mark is ruthless, but so is Sam. And Sam might be more ruthless than Ruth. It's going to be like this insane to see. These guys are not necessarily going to coexist. The world may not have room for both to scale in the way both want to. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins this one.
It's a good perspective on it.
The other one worth bringing up this week is Infinite Reality. Our old friends at Infinite Reality are rolling up more companies with their $3 billion raise, including acquiring TouchCast for $500 million. It's cash and stock, so obviously the TouchCast investors get a chance at the IPO whenever it's feasible to do something like that. But that's clearly their goal here. As you recall, they have like drone racing. They acquired Drone Racing League. They own. They acquired Zapper, which is our sponsor, Land Vault, and Napster. The Napster CEO was on the show probably 6 months ago. So these guys, Infinite Reality, I mean, they're acquiring legitimate companies. The valuation they're going to go for in the market is obviously going to be bonkers.
Yeah, it's the biggest sort of roll up in this sector, I think, that we've seen of taking companies that fit within a thesis. It used to be the metaverse thesis. Now it's the whatever we want to call it thesis of next gen
Well,
companies.
they're saying it's an AI XR thesis.
Yeah.
You know what they're missing? It was probably a $30 million roll up of an AI XR podcast.
Oh, that's a good idea. They could make that podcast work for them.
Yeah, I mean, Zapper's
And I'm certainly not above
portfolio.
that. So,
and by the way, every company we interview that's good, they could just keep rolling up.
Maybe John Acunto, their CEO and founder, is listening to our podcast right now. John Acunto, Ted and I want to come work for you, so you know where to find us. We know something about AI and XR, and we're happy to talk about it, which is what we do every Friday morning.
We are your deal flow.
I don't see
way,
Adam here.
Listeners,
I hope he's not going to stand us up. But let me keep going through the news, because
guys, we have gone off the rails this morning, just for everyone to be on the record.
What? This is our usual podcast. I forgot to pull out my nice microphone. I hope I hear. Oh, here's Adam.
You sound fine. We all sound fine today, surprisingly.
Testing.
Adam,
Hey,
good to see you.
Welcome.
good to see you guys. How's it going?
It's going great. We're excited excited to have you on the podcast. It's I only asked you to come on like 10 months ago.
Hey, if eventually we figure out a schedule system.
So that's on us. But thank you for your patience, and thanks for making time.
Was it on you? Oh, I was thinking it was on me.
Well, it was on you at first, but then the real delay was on us. So anyway, thanks again.
Well, I think it's a more interesting time anyway.
And I was and I don't know if you remember our conversation. I think it was at AWE, but I told you look like your dad, and he invested in my first company in the 90s. So that's when he did look like you do.
Yeah, and so if you see pictures of us now, it might be a little different. But
No,
yeah,
well, for you, it's before and after.
I know it's a I take it as a big compliment. My dad's awesome, and he is still he's still humming.
Oh yeah,
moves,
no,
so.
I know. We see him in the news all the time.
Yeah.
Do you know Rony and Ted? Have you guys met before?
Rony, I know of you from just years of being in this space, and so I've admired your work. And the Magic Leap was technically incredible accomplishment. So I'm like I'm a huge fan, and so awesome to see you. And Ted, great to meet you.
You too.
So before you came on, we were just reflecting on how many of the companies you've invested in that we've had on this show over the past 5 years.
Yeah. I was making a point to the guys that would be interesting for you to reflect on and give us a take on. When you sort of look statistically at startups, right? I think you'll know where this is going.
Yeah.
The statistic I understand is that 95% of startups that get some degree of funding, venture or other, ultimately flame out, right? They do not succeed. So that's a 95% failure rate, 5% success rate. how do you grok that thesis and play with that thesis and work that thesis to ensure that you're not at that same success or failure rate? Or is 5% success enough? Do you put enough bets out on the table that 5% is a working thesis for a successful VC?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, man. The real answer in how I perceive venture capital broadly is, I think that it's compounding knowledge, right? Like you when you invest, uh, you end up, whether or not the company succeeds, you end up with a relationship with the founder and knowledge of what happened in that time frame. And you end up, so I think virtual reality or XR is like a perfect example of, I probably know more about the history and current conditions of VR XR than anyone. Almost, other than probably like Meta. Like I've just invested in so many different companies over the course of the last decade that I have this amazing sample set, and I always joke I'll eventually be right.
Well, that's basically our thesis as well, is that you build this institutional knowledge, you build these layers of understanding, and can talk and think intelligently and discover what those founders bring to the table that can add to that thesis, right? And ultimately that thesis starts to work. And all it takes is a couple of ones that are right to cover all the bets, right?
That is my model in venture capital. It's also, I think that there's a value that people just don't take into account, that is not capital, that is just sort of like you giving someone a shot, and that ends up paying over the course of 30-40 years a lot of value back. And so I'm I think capital is one way to, we have done very, very well as a venture fund, um, but we also are taking a lot of first shot bets, and so we have to assume that a
Sure.
huge
Yeah,
percentage of
part of Boost thesis, if I'm correct, is that you make a lot of pre-seed bets, so they're relatively small bets. So if you fail small, and you can afford to make a lot of those bets. So you
Yep.
find the best people with the best ideas, give them a little bit of runway, and if they start to get some momentum, you give them some more, and you start to bring in other partners and sort of form a community around the project.
Right. See
Yes.
if one hits it out of the park. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, when you lose money, you lose 1x, right? And if you have a shot at, you want to make sure that the ceiling is uncapped on how much money you could make. And so whenever there's a chance where it's like, hey, if I trust the person, so I think that the person I'm backing solid has the capabilities. If I'm if I lose 1x, but if they're right, it's like it changes the way the world works. Like that's big, and so that's sort of my framework. It's always, okay, I could lose 1x, or you know we were investors in Colossal, which got a lot of news in the last couple weeks for bringing back the dire wolf. Like that was sort of an uncapped upside.
Yeah, yeah.
The but I think that I believe we are all right on immersive with XR VR, and right now is an interesting time in it because the news I'm getting from our startups is like, hey, we're growing, and but then like it's quiet out there, right? Like there's a couple like social signals that it's like no one really wants to talk about it publicly, but internally a bunch of our companies are doing very, very well. So it's weird. It's a weird time.
Yeah,
And
we see that. No, go ahead, Ronnie.
no, you go, Ted.
I was just say we see that as well, that the internal workings of XR, inside enterprise and industry are kind of thriving. Like when people find use cases for this technology, it really starts to work and those companies actually start to do really well. We were just making a point about, before you joined, about NVIDIA and sort of their build up to success and the reality of actually knowing how to work into a market that became a humongous market. XR feels a lot like that. Like it's not the sexy stuff that matters. It's the unsexy stuff where people are using it for med tech, for heavy and light industry, for all these various use cases that matter a lot. And
Yeah,
you
and
know,
there's going to be someone just yesterday was talking to me about like a Chat GPT moment for VR, XR, immersive, where we kind of have early adopters covered, and there's going to be a product that just hits the vein of like the every person. Um, you know, I've only I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and it is interesting in industries that like every industry kind of grows in shelves. Like it just like when it's growing, it grows straight up, and then it kind of plateaus for a little bit, and then it grows straight up and plateaus for a little bit. um I think that the latest like growth straight up hasn't happened, and it creates confusion in the market. But when I'm looking at the demographics of like 10 to 20-year-olds, they love the product, right? And then there's this enterprise industry that also loves the product.
mhm.
So it's a I think it's just like, yeah, it's kind of just like, you go in every day and you put in the work.
Adam, question for you. One is like sort of semi-serious, other one's a little more in line, but I'm gonna ask you the more fun one first. So Neil Stevenson used to work with me at Magic Leap as our chief futurist, and he and I were talking about Colossal maybe 6-7 months ago because I've got some farmland in the Northeast. I'm like, I want to populate it with like woolly mammoths. He's like, oh, do you hear about this company called Colossal? I know some of the guys there. Um, and then just this last few weeks, I've rewatched all the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World films, getting ready for the new one coming out. And the question is, when I look at your website and I look at the prequel parts of like Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, is there any sense of irony that you guys are actually a Spielberg script come to life, Michael Crichton Spielberg script to life? And and who's your Jeff Goldblum? And does anyone actually watch those movies enough to go, this could end badly with the biting and screaming and whatever else happens? So
Well,
anyway,
I
that's
think
my
the moral
semi-serious
there is
question.
don't clone a velociraptor.
the
Yeah, yeah. Don't build a velociraptor or breed a
you know
wolf with a velociraptor or whatever else could happen. But like when I look at the website, if people haven't seen it, it's colossal.com. It literally looks like a movie website that Weta or Lucasfilm would have done for a Spielberg movie. Except you're an actual investor, and this company has actually made a genetically modded, dire wolf. And so, yeah, I just want to get your take on it because it's like it seems insane, but it's like it's kind of cool that you're funding it.
so first off, it's really funny you mentioned that. I always think I was I was raised by like science fiction, so the like I like the way that my imagination works is like whatever the peak of imagination of all those sci-fi writers, and really like comic books. So Stan Lee, like I just looked at a deal that's like Doctor Octopus's arms, and I'm like, kind of have to do it, right? Like I don't know, and so my answer to the question is like, okay, on the I think that it's the result of just having been able to imagine all of these things over the course of my entire life and being like, yeah, those could work because like they worked in the comic books and like someone imagined them. And like I have no ego in just how insane it sounds, but it's like I have spent 39 years just thinking about how these are going to work in the real world. Uh, and the and my 12-year-old, I always think like, would my 12-year-old self like be jazzed about it? And it's like my 12-year-old self would be jazzed, right? Like whether it's colossal or we've done 2 jetpacks, an exoskeleton, like at one point our entire thesis was anything that gets us closer to an Iron Man suit,
Mhm.
which is one of the things that brought us to virtual reality and immersive. Um, and so that would be my and your secondary question is like, has anyone thought about like if they get smart enough and start breaking out, And you know, I hope tigers break out of zoos all the time. It happens.
Well,
I
the
feel like
question is, will
okay,
there?
this is an archival podcast. In 10 years, like someone will splice together like, the backstory of the
They're like,
Spielberg
it was
Dire
certain.
Wolf Park or something. Yeah.
Okay,
Adam
so
said,
let me just go from sci-fi becomes sci-fact.
Yep.
So what other sci-fi is going to become sci-fact? And obviously AGI would be the first thing, but there must be many others on your mind.
Oh yeah. The one that keeps popping up recently is like tell me if I'm off going too far off random places, but like uh the battle room in Ender's Game. I don't know if you guys
Sure, of course.
like I truly think sports are going to be done in space in the next 10 years. Like that's a real possibility now. That we're going up there all the time, and just it'll also solve a bunch of like small problems where we just don't know how things will react. Uh, people just went up for fun to space, like
So it'd be like Echo Arena,
Yeah.
but real.
yeah, like Echo Arena. Actually, VR is a really good simulator of a lot of different things. I think that's going to be a common use case, is just like simulating different environments to like get us all ready for whatever the thing is. Rapid iteration, anything that gets us to experiment faster, uh, is always good. There's a world where most of my friends are AI. That's sort of like a scary one to me, but
That's happening, I think, for a
that's a
lot of
very
people, right?
possible world. ChatGPT is truly an incredible product. I've been using it for a lot of research. It's not always right, by the way. Still, like I just don't believe everything you read, I guess, is the moral of the story there.
Yeah, it also is very flattering and encourages you to make mistakes.
But I'll tell you where I went, and I felt an uncomfortable sense of what the future was going to look like, and I feel like that's really good where you've sort of seen the future and you're like, I'm not sure I love it. Uh, I did, by the way, but I'm just saying, like, you sort of feel like there's a change occurring. There's these things called freedom zones, um, and they're like special economic zones in the world, and one of them's in Honduras. It's called Prospera. We are an investor, so I should probably cite that. And I went, and it's attracted this group of biohackers. So another thing that's going to happen is we're going to become hybrid bio cyborg people. That's like very close to.
all right, I love this podcast today. Dan, you need to come back a lot more, but keep going. Sorry for interrupting.
I know, it's like you're reciting.
This is so batshit crazy. This is
excited.
like, we're out there right now. Let's just keep going. Keep going, Adam.
This is my portfolio, right? So there is going to be innovations in governance to allow for more innovation. And so I went down with my dad, and we did this like business trip in South America, and it was amazing. Four countries in 8 days. And at the end of it, we ended up in Honduras, and on Roatan, there's a special economic zone that they've negotiated for. And you go there, and it's just beautiful. It's like the most beautiful resort you've been to ever. 200 yards off the coast is like the second largest coral reef. And then they take you, and so then that night there was a pitch day at this local bar. It's like a dive bar. And there were 13, 14 pitches. And the first 3 pitches that I got were take people's heads off and put them on cyborg bodies. Take people's heads off and put them on other people's bodies for longevity. And then
Altered carbon.
Dissect human brains after they're dead to figure out where neurons go for machine learning algorithms. And my dad and I were we ran in a random place and just sort of like like where am I? Because it was the most free thinking pitches I've had in high density for 14 straight pitches I'd probably ever experienced. And about 10 pitches in, my dad turns to me and he leans over and he goes, 7 out of 10 of these are fundable. And I was like, yeah, right? Like, this is like crazy. Like, they're all very talented. They're all like thinking big. But, removing people's heads, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if we're ready for it. And they all tried to make it sound rational. They were like, yeah, there's precedent. Someone removed like a dog's head, put it on a pig, lasted for 4 minutes. Like it was like crazy stuff like that.
Is it the ultimate like free market libertarian zone? Is it one of those like no rules really?
So,
Like is it the apex of what the valley's been trying to do without regs?
so the perception of it would be that, yes. What it actually ends up being is sort of like little pockets of the most free thinkers in any category. So right now, it's sort of like they've created a zone and then they have districts that are going to be innovating in different areas that are more like the city, like a bio city, a biohacker city. They also, when we visited their biggest building, which they had built, and it's the tallest building on Roatan, and they permitted it in 2 weeks because they can just move fast. Um, Everyone had implants, and this is where I was like, that I walk in and they're like, "Do you want an implant?" And I was like, "Whoa!" Like I'm living in the future here, and I'm not ready for this. And there's someone who has headphone implants. They got magnets on their fingertips, which I thought would be tough for like if you were a builder or a tinkerer, like having magnets on your fingertips might not work. But but people are like romanticize they whenever you talk to someone who has magnets in their fingertips, they're like, I can feel magnetic fields all around me all day, and it's like a seventh sense. And you're like, I kind of want that now, You're like, so I would say where I've actually experienced what the future is going to be was Prospera in Roatan, where there are these free thinkers who are tinkering and building, uh, and it was really exciting. So
Well,
yeah,
in the most sort of positive light of all that, when you think about that and reflect on it, these what seem like audacious ideas that are kind of instantly scary, and reflect on things that were scary just a generation ago: gene editing, CRISPR, stem cell research. It's all kind of born off that same tree, right? The most audacious ideas get distilled down into things that do have a reality base that actually can move forward with real science and real efficacy. But they often start as these kind of whack job startups that sort of
and
present these ideas.
what I keep saying is they've normalized their idea of normal, the bar raised. Like it was just like they all have this idea of like this area, what it is, and they're building like they're trying things, and they don't feel. So we meet a lot of bio startups, and whenever it's entrepreneurs kind of have to play in the gray area of everything, and they have to not feel like regulation rules them. They have to be like, hey, this is best for the world and thus it will exist, kind of thing. And in bio, they've just completely conditioned the whole world to just like succumb to the regulatory systems. And then you go to Prospera and they're like, hey, we're gonna solve cancer for everyone. We're gonna like they're just like, hey, we're gonna solve it. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna do all that stuff.
Right.
So it was refreshing. It was a little scary. Also, I'm obsessed with flippening. So what you were talking about at TED, where when I was growing up, it was don't play video games. You'll never go to college. And then there's like scholarships for video games. Don't get into a stranger's car. And now like all I do is get in a stranger's car.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, that's startup mentality, right? Is looking at things through a different lens. And when you're working with companies that literally have nothing to lose and everything to gain, regulation doesn't mean much to them. It may mean something at some point in their evolution if they become successful, but at this point, they're trying to mold the world into their shape, into the thing that they see that no one else has seen. And that's what the best sort of VC investing kind of cultivates, is that idea of giving these folks that have nothing to lose and everything to gain a little bit of a shot at actually winning the game. And it's proven that it works.
it does, and it's also fun to watch the challenges that every industry sort of like goes through. It's
So I want to ask a quick question about Prospera and then get back to robots in space.
Done.
So Prospera, when you say you invested in Prospera, so you invested in the company that's creating this economic zone and it gets a little piece of all the investments. So you said, what, instead of investing in these 10 companies or the 8 of them that are investable, let's just invest in Prospera and just take the profits that they
So
find.
we're actually, we just committed to one of the deals that we saw there in Prospera also. So actually, what Prospera is sort of it's sort of the governance of the thing. So they're setting the rule set and the laws and the
Sure.
innovation in the innovation zone. By the way, all over Prospera, Bitcoin is accepted. Like they're really trying to like push any innovations that are happening. I just talked to someone who's trying to start up the space district, so innovate in space with in this place. And so we invest, and what they do is they I mean the really how it works is they have and they own like acres in this area, so their jurisdiction is like the acreage that they're owning. um, and it's sort of a real, in some ways it's a real estate company that could scale to other places and zones. What they're trying to prove is that they can create more innovation with less regulation. Like they're trying to prove that. The founder's incredible. Eric has this is his life's work. Like when he was in business school 15 years ago, 20, like this was his thesis. He's been working towards it for a really really long time, and this is the furthest along. So there's a lot popping up. So Balaji has one called the Network State that's near Singapore. There's
Neom, right?
there,
Isn't Neom in Saudi Arabia supposed to be the ultimate one of these?
Neom's a good example. Yeah, those two are definitely Saudi Arabia, and in a lot of ways Dubai. Like Dubai is in some ways they've just dropped regulations, allowed people to do stuff, and like it happened.
Yeah, Dubai's kind of the archetype for this concept, right? It's and because it's a very real, robust thing that still has to live within kind of regulations and rule sets, right? But
Yes,
yeah,
Neom. We have a couple companies who are like one that it's helping consult on the coral reef that they're going to create on the edge of the thing. So
hmm
it's a really, all the stuff. It's just I've kind of recently felt that I'm living in the future, which is kind of cool. Like, I'm talking to a machine 20, 30 minutes a day. I have a car that drives me places. Rockets are launching like every day, basically, and then I have a 3D printer right here. I got VR glasses. Like, our 12-year-old selves are just jazzed right now.
So AGI, I think probably all of us on this podcast are in agreement that AGI, or whatever we want to call an exponentially improved ChatGPT, would be like. So let's say we usher in an age of AGI in the next 3 to 5 years. What does that do to the world? What changes at that moment? Ted, this is also you and Rony chime in. I mean, I don't know.
well, I, I
Well,
mean,
I want to hear what Adam says.
Adam
Though.
is
This is
postulating, so let's give him a chance to process.
Yeah, well, what you think about is like, okay, what does my time look like? Was my first question I asked in that world. So, like, I have a 24-hour, day, just like anyone else. How has my time changed? Have we been able to? Does this help us reduce the number of hours we have to sleep? Right? Like, will I actually have an extended amount of life just based off of how much I'm sleeping? Is there uh, throughout the day, I would say most of if is a truth, suddenly a single person can have a full company that does a lot of the digital work. So digital work is no long is a full commodity, and suddenly I could run a huge business as a solo person. Most of my job ends up being competing on, where am I competing? It probably ends up being in a creative world. So like on the where's my creative edge of the game map? I think humans like the beauty. It makes us think like, what is a human, and are we a transference species from nature to whatever this machine system is going to be? But I think that humans are really, really good at solving abstract problems, and we when we cycle brain power towards it, like we continue to solve those problems when we're focused on it, and we like surviving. So I would guess that it skews towards good. I always think technology ends up being skewing towards justice. So it's like every time people think of the extreme, I think of technology breakthroughs in magnitude, and to Rony's point earlier about like the mammoth breaking out of the zoo, there, a hammer can build a house and kill someone, right? There's a magnitude of like good and bad that it could do, but I believe that the magnitude of bad it can do 10x better good of whatever the tool is. And so and that's what I keep seeing in the world. Whenever we create a tool, there is some small set of bad that ends up happening. In crypto, it's sort of like these scammers, these people who steal, these there's a group of human nature that ends up skewing that direction. But there's like 10x more people who now are banked, right? Like who actually have a safe haven for their capital, who can actually participate in an economy of money. And so what does that AGI world look like? There is a crazy book. It's not a crazy book, but there's a book called Scythe that it's about we've cured all aging and disease. We can live forever. We're immortal. But there is this one job that gets selected not randomly, but like called the Scythe that has to statistically kill people. So there's one person's job that they have to statistically kill people based off of AGI. They call it the Thunderhead, but like they have to kill people off of this idea of the Thunderhead. And I think about that where it's like, okay, we've cured disease. I'd say it'll create new human problems rather than old ones. That's the exciting thing about it. It's like
A little bit.
we'll have
That's a
new
little bit.
human problems.
That's a little bit like Soylent Green back in the day. For you may not be old enough to remember the movie, but you might want to check out that movie if you like that
We
piece.
we could do a whole podcast on does tech lead to justice?
Yeah.
My thesis is the opposite these days, Adam. I feel like that democracy and freedom are actually not compatible with a free and open internet.
Wow. Hot take.
So run that back us again, Charlie. Give us some.
I said I do not think that the internet plus AI it makes democracy impossible. So we thought it was going to free us, but in fact, it has shackled us and put us in a world where we literally are having our minds controlled in ways that are opaque to us. So, if I like to say, and obviously, Adam, one of the things I like to do is overstate my case to make a point. And in this case, I would say if Hitler had AI and the internet, he could have won World War II without fighting.
I mean, same could be said for the U.S., right?
I think I'm talking about the U.S.
Well, Charlie, you bring up an interesting. There's a question I wanted to ask Adam, which is, I don't totally agree with Charlie. I think we can go down like a huge rabbit hole on that one.
I know. I said it would be a whole episode, so we can go back to robots in space.
Well, here's the robots in space sort of question for Adam. Do you believe there should be boundary conditions to what you invest in and what others invest in? And what I mean by that is, I've been in tech since college, and I've adopted a philosophy of like, we can do almost anything. I've worked on some of the craziest stuff you can imagine, like robots and AI and XR. But I always impose boundaries on what we were doing. Like when I worked on robots, we integrated Asimov's 3 laws into our code. We made that robot obey those laws. We weren't building Terminator, we were building like R2 and 3PO. I probably pissed off Google because I said you can't access any of the data our system is going to collect. They're like, this is the world's greatest way to understand the intent of a user wearing, spatial computing. And I'm like, but you'll have no access to it. It's completely the property of the user. So I imposed boundaries that I thought were important for people to live with technology in the future to create this symbiosis. So I'm wondering, what's your take on that? Because a lot of the people I've met at tech conference, a lot of fellow CEOs in tech are like, no. Like, why are you doing that? It's just like whatever happens, it'll all settle out. And I've always had the idea you should consciously put ethical boundaries and other boundaries in order to keep us as a species safe, because we really don't know the unintended consequences. And I'm like, how is that either consciously or unconsciously informed the way you think about things?
Okay, so
It's a big question. Sorry.
the businesses, so my definition of business, and so I'm going to focus more on the question from not like building technology necessarily, but what we believe success of business is, right? And I believe that business is about making promises and delivering on promises. And so it's a compounding trust building exercise. And in order to do that, like let's say that's the goal. The goal is like to scale the most amount of trust that you could be able to make through technology, through what the essence of whoever the leaders of that company are. Um, then you do need to think in terms of boundaries, right? Like you have to think in terms of. I sort of always tell my founders like, hey, don't take advantage of, don't kill, don't steal. Like there seems like pretty simple rule sets. And I've been in crypto 15 years and like I've survived. Like there is sort of a don't get too greedy like methodology, but that's when you're taking advantage of. The greed is like when you're taking advantage of, and so I always say like don't like I also don't love don'ts, so I try to reapply them in other ways. Um, I think that these are lessons that sort of those guardrails for those founders that you're talking about, like they end up hitting guardrails at some point. There's sort of like a community guardrail that everyone gets hit with at some point with in terms of like they're not written, they're not but I like to believe, and I'm a true optimist, like it to my soul. My wife is like loves and admires it. I'll say admires it. Um, but I'm like such an optimist that it's like all I think is like, okay, my truth of the world is humans are great. Like whenever people start to talk about humans not being like whenever someone makes a statement that's like they say they don't like who the
Who
hell
is
is
that?
they? Yeah, like who's they? And because when I meet people in the world, I meet these people and like every person around me. I go to Honduras, I go to wherever you're going. Like people are good. Like they want to build things and be useful. And there is obviously some subset, some small tiny percentage of people who have decided to pick the non-positive path. But when I think about guardrails, I try to think of them as like over the course of the last 10,000 years, those like moral guardrails that you're talking about, they've had to shift so much for innovation and for us to be able to allow for more and more people to survive, right? Like we have had to evolve to, you know, this is a really cool. I mean, you guys are great. Like you guys are asking me. This is all I like to talk about and think about. So I appreciate it. I'm like, I don't know if this is going way off the rails, but it's like, hey, over the last 10,000 years, if I went back in time 500 years, I'm pretty sure the moral code of 500 years ago is way different than the moral code of today. And so, like, me assuming that I know what the right moral code is in 500 years is probably not the right move. But me trying to make the best call on today is probably the right move. So that's my.
No, that's a good answer. I mean, a lot of times, Adam, you hear from like the venture community, don't worry about it. Just go and things will sort themselves out. They always do. In the case of something like, look, Google's motto used to be "Don't be evil."
Yeah.
At some point in time, like when the founders visit us at Magic Leap, one of our, I'm not going to name who it was, but one of our like snarky engineers came up to them and goes, "Is the new motto don't be evil?" Sometimes, because it had changed by that time. They were already
..
Yeah, or let's redefine the word evil. And I think you see this all the time, like the you get to meet the founders at the heady utopian garage days, which is like awesome.
Yeah.
But you probably know some of these guys when they've hit they have $100 billion plus company. I'm sure you know people have been on that journey. They're not the same person, and don't be evil is probably not entirely true anymore.
You're saying success changes people, so they change their values.
To a degree. For some. Look, Paul Allen, I don't know if you got to meet Paul Allen. Adam, he passed away a couple years ago, founded Microsoft with Bill Gates.
Yeah.
He was a generally decent person and was trying to find a way to like put what he had made into all these good hands, and was like, he had his fun. He had like Jimi Hendrix's guitar, but he had that decency intact. I've known other founders who I knew at the beginning of their journey who now have hit tens of billions, and they've gone Caligula. They're like full Roman Emperor Caligula, and it's like, oh my God, what happened to you?
It's create value, capture value, maintain value. There's sort of like sequences of it, and your relationship with money and how you've perceived it your whole life probably has something to do with it. I think of it as like potential energy. So I actually don't like holding money that much. I like getting it out there and like letting it fly, because the energy should be in the hands of people who build things. I'm like a router, like I'm a.
That's a very cool notion. That's really cool.
Yeah, and so I'm a router of energy, and like I hope that I'm putting the route in the correct the right places. But to combat, I am going to combat it. What you said just a little bit, and my only example that we're all, but my experience is different than your guys' experience, right? Like I don't have all the wisdom yet, but my I've been able to watch the journey of certain founders for 15 years, and the best journey I've been able to watch is Brian Armstrong's from Coinbase. And everyone in that industry, I don't know if anyone could have done what he did and to be like, there are very few people who could have like maintained the path the same way he did, where it's like he took the courage route almost every single step of the way, where it was like, this is right for our mission. And so, where Google is sort of interesting, it's a good example. It's an interesting example because you always hear people cite their values rather than their mission now, where with Coinbase, you hear people cite the mission rather than their values. And it's an interesting thing where the target became the values rather than the mission, where the mission is really great. It's indexing all the information of humanity, right? Like that was like organizing and indexing all the information. And I think hey, people still might change over time, but you're right. Money does change people when you have a specific relationship one way or the other, where it's like, now I have it and I have to maintain it. That's where we lose innovation. I think that's my fear, is when we have money and we hold on to it too tightly. So I just love to, whenever I can, I want to just say like, hey, there are, like Paul Allen, he might be just a Paul Allen, right? Like it's almost like, chivalry's not dead. He feels that maintaining this course will be what's best for humanity, and every step along the way with the founder. By the way, he is different than he was obviously in the first 5 years, the middle 5 years, the next 5 years. Everyone you have to figure out, oh, I could actually do this. Like there's sort of this 5-year journey where you're like, there's a 50% chance this dies tomorrow for like the first 5 years. And then the next 5 years is like, wait, maybe I can win, And then it's like, oh, well, now what?
But you're right about Brian. He is a really good example of the opposite of what I was talking about. Someone who has some core and he stayed on mission throughout a very complex industry, right? With a lot of people going down the wrong roads and getting in huge trouble. And Brian's been like really good. So that's a great example of someone people don't talk about enough.
Yeah. He is, Dick Kramlich from NEA, who unfortunately passed, was another person who passed away about a month and a half ago. He founded NEA. He used to say, everyone thinks venture capital is a game of numbers. It's not. It's a game of courage. And whenever I think of like that idea of courage, I'm like, Brian Armstrong is the guy. Like he made the most absurd social statement about companies in the hardest time to do that, and every other company followed. And he wasn't that big at that time. It was, it was $1 billion, $2 billion company in 2021. No, it was maybe a little bigger than that. But yeah, no, he's fantastic. That was luck, man. I'm very lucky to have been a part of that journey. So I'm not.
Yeah, congrats on that, by the way. That was a big win for your fund.
It's been
so we've got like 2 minutes left.
Great.
So this has been a fantastic conversation. I did want to get back to robotics and space, though.
Great, let's do it.
Let me ask two.
By the way, I don't know if we covered anything you wanted to cover.
Oh, no.
This is exactly what we want to cover. This is how.
This is so. On this podcast, people are always like, "Do you have a list of questions that you?"
The only thing you guys are missing are morning beers to hand out right now. That's the only.
Digital beers. Zoom should have a button for that, just like a digital.
Right. So instead of a reaction where we all have smiley faces, we all have beer mugs. So what is your vision for how, there's a lot of talk about robots with AI. What is your take on that? Where are we going with robots and robot helpers? And it's funny because I think we have a lot of robots around us now. We talked about self-driving cars a minute ago. So we're in the hands of robots quite a lot. But now there's the Optimus. And of course, you've got the robots that Boston Dynamics has been working on and showing exciting videos of on the internet for at least 5 years. So I wonder what your take on robotics is and humanoid robots in particular.
It's a great question, and I'm gonna again go back to the base and just define technology for what it is to me, which is technology is something that saves you time or creates certainty. And so my definition of technology is anything that saves you time or creates certainty. You can think of almost any service or technology that you perceive, and it is one of those two things. So when I think about robotics, and obviously there needs to be something enabled. Whenever you talk to a robotics entrepreneur, they're always talking about new actuators, and I make a joke that I still don't know what an actuator is, but evidently there's new ones, and those ones are very, very important. And the the actuator technology, and so the question is, let's say, these new AI ML systems for computer vision and for have these technologies gotten to a point where they do enable the average human to save time, or what create time is really what saving time means. Create time or create certainty. And the Roomba is unfortunately like the best robotics, and unfortunately or fortunately, like I never want to bash the Roomba. Roomba's like an amazing product, great business. But I've always wanted more robots around me, right? I've wanted more like sentient things, and I think that we're at a point where there's enough capital or potential energy going into robots that we're going to learn. I don't know if we're there, right? Like I think, hey, my Tesla drives me, and that's the coolest robot on the planet. I'm like a huge fan of that robot. And I do think that everyone's taking these humanoid robots and they're thinking, hey, it's going to move industrial and it's going to save 500 bajillion working hours for people and more effort, and they can work through the night. And I hope that it is consistent and persistent enough that that's true. And it probably is. Like, humans have built some cool stuff that had no sentience in robotics. Have you ever seen those big old factories where like gum is made? I'm like, how did we think to do this, right? Like, how was this the way that we thought about refining gum? Put rubber in it. It was what they were thinking. So at the end of the day, the question is it now, right? Like, is it now that we're at that point? I think we're gonna, with all the investment in humanoids, we're gonna learn a lot about what the best form factor for a robot is, and I think that's really, really exciting. And that means that all the tools to build robots. This this is one way of thinking about it. Like, is there enough capital that the tools and resources become cheap enough that an 18-year-old could build an enormous business on it? Like, I think that was one of the things that gave rise to the internet boom, crypto boom, like all these. Biology is about to hit a boom where it's like the tools and resources to DNA sequence and CRISPR and like all those things is getting cheap enough that you could do it as an 18-year-old. And I think that's sort of an interesting like spot where people make a decision of who they are and what they want to go after and what they want to do. And so I think that robotics is almost getting cheap enough where that boom can happen. And that's the exciting part about the robot like boom for me.
So this is all the time we got. We don't even have time for parting shots. Thank you for being so generous and joining us this morning.
Hey, I'm sorry. I thought
No, that's not you. That's us. Because we love this
guys,
conversation. I can't get enough.
Think about robots in space.
We'll do a virtual fist bump.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Adam, Ted, and Rony. Have a great one.
Peace. Have a great weekend, guys.
Later, guys. Good to hang.
Thank you.
Good day.
There you go.